part of the Press Play Podcast Network.
Hello, welcome to Books with Brooks. The month is September 2022. My, how time flies. And I am here today with my friend Chelsea. Hi, Chelsea.
Hello.
Hello. We are here to discuss The One by John Marrs, which was I think it was your suggestion, right, Chelsea?
It sure was.
It sure was. But before we get into that discussion, which I know shall be lively, I want to announce our spooky October book for this year. October books are some of my favorite ones that we do in book club because they are generally themed for Halloween, and this year is no exception. Through a very democratic process, our book club members have selected Pet Sematary by Stephen King. Now, don't forget that is spelled cemetery, Sematary, not the usual way. This is a 1983 horror classic by the great Stephen King. I think it's about ghost pets or something. I don't know. Honestly, I'm so afraid of this one. Chelsea, do you know what it's about?
I think you have it. It's about ghost pets that come out of the cemetery of this family that lives next door. And
oh God,
I mean, it's
I'm so
definitely
scared.
a new take on the cuddly little creatures that we all love.
I think it is. Also, it makes me glad that I currently live in an apartment because we used to have so many dead pets buried in our backyard.
Yep, I know.
Growing
that used to be thing to do.
And I wouldn't want to read this book and have a bunch of dead pets in my backyard. So lucky me, there are none here. Well, I'm really excited to get into that one. I've been on a Stephen King tear. I don't know if I would describe it that way, but I've read a lot of Stephen King books since we first delved into Stephen King so many years ago with The Shining, and that was really eye-opening experience for me. So looking forward to reading another classic Stephen King novel and seeing if I am brave enough to get through it. So come back next month and we'll be talking about Pet Sematary. But this month, we're here to discuss The One by John Marrs. Chelsea, tell us why you picked this book.
I am just in love with the idea of a thriller in the beginning of spooky season. So I had specifically gotten this book because it kept popping up on my For You page as something that I would like. And
very
so
nice.
I decided to give it a whirl. And to be quite honest, the first couple chapters, I was like, whoa, where are they going with this? And it was a ride.
Yeah, that's true. Well, I'm glad you suggested it. It was, I'm glad you suggested it. I think the only other really relevant thing to mention about this book is that it is a Netflix series that came out last spring, I want to say, like it was early 2021. None of our book club had read that or had watched the series, but I think a lot of us expressed interest in doing so. So if you read the book or if you watch the series, let us know what you think of it. And I'm going to try to watch a couple of episodes as well and see what I think. I didn't recognize any of the actors, so there's no one I'm really excited about seeing on screen.
I kind of love that though. I feel like with all these characters, they're all like so unique.
Yeah, that's true.
I feel
and
like
there are a lot
interesting.
There are a lot of characters, which I think is both the pro and con of this book. You know, we talked about like it was really confusing in the beginning because you've got 5 different characters to keep track of, and you do settle into it. But I could see. I mean, that's a lot of. It was 5 different main characters plus, all the other associated people in each story. So, yeah, seeing how they do that on screen will be interesting. Chelsea, did you like this book?
I loved this book. I felt like it had all of the flavors in a good recipe. It had
I'm so glad.
some sweetness, it had some spicy, it had a little bit of salty, and a little bit of sour.
Yeah, that's true. And you actually read this one. Typically you're my audiobook gal, but you read it.
I did.
Talk to me about that. How come? Why did you do it that way?
So I had initially done it because I needed a book for the airplane, and I had my iPad with me, but my headphones had broken.
Oh
So I
no.
couldn't do an audiobook, and I was like, well, guess I gotta read.
Yeah, guess I gotta read. Well, I'm glad that you still liked it. And I think interestingly, it's worth mentioning that everyone at our book club this week liked this book, except for the person who listened on audiobook, who hated it. So I don't know what's going on with the audiobook, but maybe something bad.
Yeah, I'm kind of glad I didn't listen to it on audio, because
Uh-huh.
that makes you
And
wonder.
I feel like he doesn't usually react that strongly, like he not that like violently to what we read. So he really did not like this book. And I love when that happens. But I did wonder if like the audiobook played a part.
Yeah, it kind of makes you wonder how many audiobooks affect the way that you view a book that you would otherwise like.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we talk about books are art, and the way that you interpret them and respond to them internally has a lot to do with also what's going on in your life at that moment. I feel like I often like books better when I'm on vacation, for example.
Very true.
So, I mean, it's not just the book, right? There's so many factors that go into like your experience of reading or listening. So worth mentioning. What are the major themes of this book?
Definitely trust, and like there's senses of love and connection, and where it really stems from, whether it's biological or physical or mental. It's all of these things wrapped into one, but the connection is the real theme that I felt, and how many different ways people feel connected.
Yeah, connection. That's really good. Some of the other ones we said were like identity, family, destiny. Also, I am just realizing in my excitement to discuss this book, we neglected to give a quick plot rundown. So let's try to do that. Again, I know it's sort of complicated. We have a lot of characters. But the basic premise of this book is that someone has invented it's called Match Your DNA. So the idea is that you send your DNA into this company, sort of like you do with 23andMe, and then they email you whether or not you have a perfect match, a genetic match. So basically, like, they don't call it soulmates, but it's your genetic match. It's your one other person in the whole world that you're meant to be with genetically. And I loved it because they send you the email and then you can pay £10 to find out who is your match. And obviously, this new service has huge implications worldwide for the nature of relationships and existing marriages and how you fall in love and what it means to fall in love. So then we get a host of characters sort of at different stages in their life, who find out that they're matched, and we get to follow their stories. So we have Mandy, whose match Richard died just before or just after they were matched. Then we have Christopher, who is a serial killer who is matched with a cop named Amy. Then we have Jade, who is an English lass, but she's matched with an Australian guy who she comes to find out has terminal cancer and is actively dying. And then Nick is engaged to a chick named Sally. Engaged to a chick named Sally, who insists they do the match before they get married, and he's matched with a man named Alexander. And then we have Ellie, who is matched with a guy named Tim, and she turns out to be the founder, like the scientist who discovered Match Your DNA and turned it into like basically Facebook, like this huge multi-billion-dollar like global corporation. What else did I miss, Chelsea? Anything else important in our plot summary?
No, ma'am.
Let's read the first sentence, shall we? So the first sentence starts us with Mandy. If you'll remember, Mandy is the one whose match is dead, although she doesn't know it at this point. Mandy stared at the photograph on her computer screen and held her breath. This is kind of for me, that one.
Yeah, I am, now that I've read the whole book, it would be very hard to really make a first sentence something that told you a lot and caught your attention when there's so many different stories.
Yeah.
It's like you need a first sentence for each beginning of each story.
Totally. Yeah, that's really true. And the format of this book, I think it's worth talking about, is every chapter is from the perspective of a different one of our characters. And it switches. Actually, I didn't go through and count, but I think they basically all have the same number of chapters and we just cycle through them. And the chapters are very short, which is part of what makes this book like such an enthralling page turner for, I think, for me and for most of us, because it's just really fast. I mean, it's really fast. You spend 2 pages with each character, you're on to the next character. And there are tons of like cliffhangers. Like at the end of every chapter, there's some sort of like, oh, what's gonna happen? And you just have to keep reading. Like you have to, I thought it was really fun. Charlie hated that and thought it was really soap opera-y. So, teach their own. Well, I think the question we all want to know is, Chelsea, would you take the test? If Match Your DNA was available right now, today, would you send your DNA to see if you're matched to your husband or not?
So, interestingly enough, I would have a different answer for a different phase in life. So, no, I would not at this phase of my life. But prior to meeting Drew, absolutely I would have. Yeah.
I think my answer is the same. Although I haven't asked. No, I did ask Jake. Jake said he wouldn't do it either. So that's nice. Did you ask Drew?
I did not. I should.
You should ask him.
Yeah, but I mean, I feel like especially a lot of these characters, I think the reason why Sally and what was his name?
Sally and Nick.
I think the reason why that story made me so upset was because if they were truly happy, why would you need to do the test?
Right.
Which you come to find out a lot more things to their story as you read the book, which makes a lot more sense. But in the beginning, I remember just being like, then you're not truly happy.
Yeah. Then you're questioning something about your relationship, certainly.
Exactly.
Yeah. But I think that opens up, I mean, that's part of the fun of this book is like the debate of like, does this change what love means? Like, can you have a happy 40-year marriage with someone who isn't your match in a world where your match exists?
Mm-hmm.
Or even less than that, can you have a long-term healthy relationship with someone who might not be your match when your match exists? Like, is the potential for doubt enough to like ruin your relationship?
Yeah. And it's the unknown of things that could happen. Like,
yeah.
Whereas you're very happy and you're very content with your current spot. Like, there's no guarantee what 10 years, 20 years could bring. Whereas when you're guaranteed a match, they market it to be the end for you. You found your one. You're set for life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that does seem to be how people use it. Like, yeah, they meet their match and then they have no doubts and they are together forever after that point. Yeah, one issue I had with this book, of course, is, and it's interesting because somebody threw this back at me at book club, which I think was really fair, because we just read that Ted Chiang, which is a bunch of short stories about future technology that doesn't exist, right? And it's suspended disbelief because it's like, how does this really work? Well, he doesn't really get into it. You just have to sort of assume that it does. And I think this book does the same thing. So it's not really fair for me to have an issue with the premise and the technology in this book, but I didn't in any of those Ted Chiang stories. And I understand that, but I still did. And part of my issue was just that we had to wait so very long to get any sort of explanation at all of how this worked. It wasn't until page 194. So 200 pages into this 440 page book, like, and that's almost halfway through. And then the description just kind of sucked. It says, we already knew women produce pheromones and men have receptors that bind the pheromone molecules, and that can create an attraction between the two. But I discovered that when certain people are brought together, there's a variable gene inside us that allows both sexes to produce pheromones and have receptor genes. To heterosexual people, to gay people, it doesn't matter. Once the right match is made, it is set in stone. So it's like, what?
Definitely, that definitely pulls at your imagination. That's for sure.
You've got to just be fine with that as the explanation 200 pages into the story. And if you can be, I think it's quite enjoyable. If you can't be, this book's probably going to bother you. Let me guess, you're ready to get serious about your goals and you're looking for accountability support, but you don't have the time or the tolerance for chit chat. You're busy balancing work and life and home and bullshit, and your to-do list isn't getting any shorter. You've been talking about making that career leap, finishing that creative project, kicking that bad habit, but you simply don't have the time and the energy to invest in yourself. I get it. You, my friend, are a busy bitch. What if I told you can get maximum accountability with minimal commitment? Productivity without punishment? Uproar Coaching's Busy Bitch program brings you all of the good stuff you get from a weekly hour-long coaching session, minus the conversation. Here's how it works. Each Friday morning for 5 weeks, you'll receive an email with 3 prompt questions. Take just 10 minutes to answer those questions. By Monday, midday, you'll receive a personal reply offering support and challenging the limitations you're putting on yourself. Listeners of the Books with Brooks podcast get 10% off Busy Bitch by using promo code P3 at checkout. That's the letter P and the number 3. Visit uproarcoaching.com to learn more. It's that simple. So a couple of a lot of our characters had some pretty big ethical or moral dilemmas that they needed to confront when it came to their matches or their current relationships. On page 232, Kevin, who's our Aussie, who's dying of cancer, asks his match Jade to marry him, even though he knows he only has a few weeks to live, and she says yes. So even though it says she wanted so desperately to love him, but here at his most vulnerable, she knew that she did not. But then she says, yes, I'd love to marry you. I mean, is that the right call?
I don't know. I mean, she knows he's dying.
Right. So since he's dying, she should do it.
And, I think that it tried to portray too, and you felt it, right? I felt like this author did a really good job in explaining the internal struggles that they were having. It's with the serial killer, like his internal psyche, with Jade, this internal psyche, where you actually felt in a way her emotion, where she did love this man. She just wasn't in love with him.
Yeah.
And
right.
There are a lot of people all over the world that are with people and partners that they love. They may not be in love with them, but they love, and it's for whatever reasons. And her lucky part is it was going to be short term.
Right. Yeah. It made him really happy. So yeah, I mean, I generally think that was probably the right thing to do, even though it was sort of deceptive. But yeah, he was dying. It made him really happy. He was clearly loved her. Go for it. What's the harm here? Sure. I was kind of wondering if he was going to have some sort of miraculous recovery and not die. And then she'd have to decide what to do, because then what do you do?
Yikes. Yeah.
So in the later half of the book, we start really getting a lot of twists, and they start to come fast and furious. Every storyline's got one, and they start throwing them at us. And one of the first ones that made me be like, oh, what? Is on page 264, where in Mandy's character, and Mandy is the one who got matched with a guy named Richard who lived like a couple towns over, but found out he had died shortly after they were matched. So she becomes really obsessed with him and gets really close with his family, who are also grieving. And they convince her to have his child because they have his sperm saved because he had gotten cancer and like frozen some sperm. Okay, which is all to say, she goes and meets up with an ex-girlfriend of her dead matches. And she says, death? Michelle looked confused. Who told you Rich was dead? He's still very much alive. Bum, bum, bum.
Mm-hmm.
So it turns out he didn't actually die in that car accident or whatever it was, but he is in a coma, or he's in a vegetative state, like in a long-term care facility.
Mm-hmm.
That was a big twist. I didn't see that coming. Did you?
I definitely did not.
No,
definitely
I definitely did not. That was a pretty good one. Okay. On page 391, another twist we learn is that our Australian couple is not actually matched. In fact, Jade is matched to Kevin's brother, Mark, who lied about it to give Kevin something to like be happy about, like when they found out his illness was terminal. So Mark like facilitated this and like told him this was his match, blah, blah, blah. Jade, I guess, didn't notice that the names were different, which I feel like is a flaw in this plan, but sure. So we find that out, and then she's really pissed at him for like lying this whole time and like taking it so far, and like she got married to the other guy. Like, are you kidding me? And she says, without trust and honesty, was being matched enough to keep two people together, which I think is a really interesting question.
Mm-hmm.
Like, is it? And the book talks about how like match your DNA results in like a massive decline in divorce rates and all this stuff, because once people get matched, they don't break up. But certainly there had to be matches who break up.
I would think so. Yeah. I mean,
right.
They even kind of alluded to it in the book, where these matches don't account for serious mental disease, schizophrenia, bipolar, like psychosis, that they're not factoring these things into when they present the matches. Sometimes that's too much for people.
Yeah. So what happens when you have to leave your match? Like, are you just alone forever? Because then no other person's ever gonna like be able to hold a candle to your match. That sort of puts you between a rock and a hard place. Like, that sucks. Or like, I mean, in Mandy's situation, like if your match dies, you just have to be alone forever then? So there's no like remarriages.
Maybe in that another downside.
Wait, but maybe in that situation you marry someone else whose match died.
But then you're never going to be matched.
Well, I know, but then it's like you both know that like this isn't my match, but like I love this person, we're committed to each other, neither of us can be with our matches. Like, I feel like that could work.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that would have been a
cool story to add in.
Yeah. Well, and I'm glad you said that, Chelsea, because that was a critique of this book that I thought was really smart, which is all of the storylines we follow are people who've been newly matched. There were some peripheral characters we got to hear about, like some siblings and some friends who were matched and like had been married for a while, but none of our main characters, like, were like 30 years. Well, I guess nobody would be 30 years in though, would they? Because like, how long has Match Your DNA even been around?
I mean, it seemed like it'd only been around like 10, maybe 15 years.
That's an interesting point that I hadn't considered, but it stands, which is it would have been interesting to hear from other couples who were matched and were struggling in their relationship for whatever reason, or like had been matched or were struggling or like whatever. Instead of all of these people being at like the same stage in the process, which was like newly matched and exploring that, which I thought was fair, good point. Like might have been interesting to hear from other like perspectives and like on this timeline.
Definitely.
What did you think of the title, The One?
It could have been better.
Yeah, we discussed this at book club. Nobody liked the title. And then I was looking back at John Mars, the author, online, and he actually has a habit of changing the titles of his books after they are published. He's done it with a couple of them. Yeah. So I don't know what the deal with that is, but I agree this was not a good title. It didn't really tell you anything. It's not really Googleable. I think we all were like, it should have had the word match in it somewhere. Yeah. So unhappy with the title. Sorry, John Mars. But overall, very happy with the book. Lots to discuss here. We didn't get into the serial killer storyline. It was my least favorite, but a lot of people at book club disagreed and said it was their favorite. So I don't know. That one for me was a little much, I think, but people liked it. And it was interesting. I mean, like, what does it mean when a psychopath gets matched to their soulmate? Like, can they feel that connection with another person? So, like, interesting psychological questions.
Yeah, it felt like that story to me was like its own book. Like, it felt like it was so very different from like each of these short stories that could have been like its own book.
Yeah. Well, and something else that I don't know if this is a critique, because you don't necessarily have to do this with your books, but I thought that all of our disparate characters were going to like tie together in some way at the end. They were all going to have some kind of connection. And like, I guess they did. It was match your DNA, obviously, but they didn't know each other. Like our characters never interacted. They were totally different stories happening completely separate from each other. And like, if this were a Frederick Bachman, for example, in the end, you would have found out like that, they were all connected somehow. And that didn't happen. But yeah, overall, great read.
Yeah.
Super fun book. Excellent choice, Chelsea. I would recommend this to anyone. So pick it up and read it. The One by John Mars. Anything else we didn't talk about, Chelsea, that you wanted to touch on?
No, I mean, it's a great book. It's got it all. Like I said, the full flavor profile.
It's got it all. And it's really snackable. You just fly through those chapters, man. Like, this would be a really good vacation read, or like you said, a really good plane read, because you'd just be like, you're very engrossed very quickly. And that's an amazing feeling. All right. Well, until next month, when we return to scare ourselves with Pet Cemetery by Stephen King. Thank you so much for listening to Books with Brooks, a Press Play podcast. And thank you to Chelsea for coming on and talking about books with me. It's my favorite day of the month.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, happy reading. Books with Brooks is produced by Mo Barrow with theme music by Jonathan Allen. Books with Brooks is part of the Press Play Podcast Network, which empowers hosts to create high-quality professional shows that inspire and entertain. If you've been dreaming of hosting your own podcast, we can help. Please email content@pressplaypodcast.com to get started today. Please be sure to subscribe to get the latest episodes wherever you listen to podcasts.